Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour. I'm your host, John the Bod, aka the Bod Father, and as always, I bring you guys awesome interviews. And today it is an honor and privilege to have the abominable Vincent Renfield. He is the vocalist of the Renfields from Morgantown, West Virginia. Current album Go is out right now, and they're working on a new album as we speak, ladies and gents. And so, Vincent, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing awesome, man. Glad to have you on the show and get the Renfields on here and do some more supporting for locals and stuff. And glad to have you on, man.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, thank you very much.
So we're going to get into Go. I know it's out, but what's impressed you or excited you the most about making that album? What's caught your eye the most about it, Vincent?
That record, that record's a good. We're really slow in the Renfields, so I don't know how much you know about our history. We've been around for about like 10 or 12 years, but back in the day when we were a two-man kind of operation or a three-man operation, as opposed to being a 8-person operation like we are now, we kind of cranked out records and stuff. But Go was this big transition for the Renfields, because we started like we were kind of like the White Stripes of horror punk in a way, I guess. We're just two members, drums, guitar, and me, doing vocals and stuff. But we kept adding members and pushing more towards. It was always kind of heavily leaning towards not so much horror punk, but leaning towards being a satire of horror punk within horror punk. But for that record, it was like the first one we did in the studio. It was the first one that we spent a lot of money on that record, for us, for a band that's not making a living off of specifically playing music. We spent a lot of money in a real studio and a lot of production. So we really got caught up in this idea that it had to be like the perfect, this perfect record. In our minds at the time, like we had this legacy, which I think a lot of bands have it, like we in our minds, we've been going for this long, we put all this hard work in, maybe nobody knows who we are, but at that point in time, we're like, this has got to be our best record. This is, this is the culmination of all this hard work and everything. So the recording of that record was honestly, terrible and stressful. Whereas everything the Renfields did before that was, fuck it, we're just going to do the best with what we have. We used to only record in mono, and this was our first like stereo recording. And so when we finally got to that record, everyone was going fucking crazy. Like the band was like breaking up from within. Our guitar player ended up, he was really good with, mixing, mastering. He was one of those guys too, but he ended up taking over for the actual engineer that was working on the record. And he spent like 8 months trying to work on this thing that should have been, 2-month process at most. Went back and re-recorded drums like 3 times, re-recorded guitars 3 times. So for that record, as cool as it was to do, like, it was like our big release, and we did fold-out poster and foil cover and, super, amazing artwork by this artist that we really wanted to work with. And when it finally came out, we all hated it. We all hated the songs. And I listened back to it and I hate what it is, as much as like people seem to like it. But for me, I'm like, those guitars are too jangly. It took too long. The band was breaking up. So it's like a bittersweet thing. It was cool to release it and, have like a nice release that was professional and all that stuff. But it was actually like, as we're releasing the record, like members are leaving and the band's going crazy from within and all this stuff. So since that record, we have changed to our current lineup now. Everyone but Herbie, the drummer, and myself are completely different. So, and we're still friends with all those people, but that record killed a large number of Renfield members in the process.
Oh, geez. Jeez, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, it was just, I think, when you put so much pressure on yourself, like I said, man, most people, I don't think most people know who the fuck the Renfields are, but to us, all of this hard work and these years of pushing forward with this band, like we just put so much stress on ourselves. There was actually the most absurd conversation I've ever had as a member of any band or with anybody. There was a point in time where we were arguing. I think it was like the drummer and myself are arguing about, like, he's saying like, we've got to get this fucking record done before we play Delaware. And like, it's insane that there was like, literally in our insanity, there was a point in time where we thought that we had to have the record out by this, you know, this Delaware show. And nowhere in the history of the world has anyone ever uttered those words like Delaware is such an important moment in our future. And it wasn't. It was just another shitty show. But, you know, we were all insane at that point. I mean, and it, you know, like, it came out okay and everything, but it's not the Renfields record that I would have wanted to see released. Like, I was still playing guitar in the band at that time, and I recorded all my guitar tracks, and then we re-recorded the drums multiple times. So I ended up, like, told our other guitar player, like, you just record my guitar tracks and just whatever, it'll sound better. And, cause he was a much better guitar player than I was anyways. And, so he re-recorded them, but then I heard him and I was like, oh, it doesn't sound like, oh, that's not Renfield. That's jangly, you know, poppy punk rock guitars. And so, I mean, it has a different sound for sure. It's got like a very polished poppy sound, which we wanted to go for, but I think we went a little too far with it. That's Go. Go is just like the recorded, it's the same thing as the recorded history of Pompeii. Everything is melting down and, you know, it stands, you know, and people like it. I still cringe when I hear it, not because I think it sounds bad, but because it's like, that's not what it should have sounded like. But
are there any songs off of it though that you like that stand out possibly to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of songs. Like, I love all the songs on there. I mean, especially for that, you know, those first like 7 or 8 years, I was like the primary, you know, songwriter, and of course I'm like a skeleton songwriter, so I'll write all the basics, and then everybody puts the meat on it. But like lyrically and stuff like that, like, you know, I'm real happy with it. And we recorded some songs that are songs that we play now still, and we'll always play, like, you know, Burning Revenge and Night of the Creeps, all of those kind of songs. At this point in the band, we've been playing shows off of that record, I think 4 or 5 years. It's either 4 or 5 years, because it gets kind of muddy in my mind, because we recorded and it took like 2 years to get it out. But I want to say almost 5 years now that record's been out, and there are songs that I like, you know, objectively. But for me and for most of the guys in the band now, we're really tired of playing most of those. Like Machete A Go-Go will never be not able to play and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're like, let's move on past these. You know, we already have another record written, in the process of recording and all of this stuff. And anyone who's in the band probably knows when you start approaching that next record, all the old songs kind of start to, or at least they should, in my opinion, should start to lose a little bit of their luster. You know, if you're writing good songs, it's like, okay, I'm tired of playing everything but these. So. Right.
Now, you guys produced this yourself. Do you want to keep doing it that way, or do you actually want to go to a recording studio and try to do this? I mean, what's your take on it, man? What do you like or want to do?
I like going into a studio, and I mean, I guess it kind of, we did produce it ourselves. I think it's a different thing for, you know, bands of our size. It's not like we're going in really with any big producer that's going to change our sound in any way, but it really makes the difference. Like, some of our previous records, we did everything ourselves, you know, but to me, when you have an objective person there who, you know, maybe they're just hitting the button and then they're doing the mix, you know, like it's very helpful. I don't think it's a good idea to produce everything from within if you're in the mind state we were for that record. For our next record, I think the plan is to do the same thing again, but I think we're in a different mindset, and we have I mean, this is not bullshit or a joke or anything at all, but it sounds fake, but we also, he'll be pissed if I say it, we have a member of the Renfields who is literally a Grammy-nominated sound engineer. So,
nice.
So it would be stupid for us to not let him do it. But we've certainly had the discussion of like, hey, last time we did this, we went crazy, and you have to be able to take a step back, and, you know, we don't want to polish it to death. You know, Sure. It's a punk record; it shouldn't be polished to death.
Right.
But
exactly.
You know,
from back when you started till now, how much growth musically have you seen? Of course, yourself and this band go through up till now to start writing on this new album.
I think it's totally different. You know, like I said, our first couple records kind of had I was really into doing something that was kind of like the Mummies, or another band like that, like Supercharger, like the garage stuff, and recording in mono, only because that was all we had to work with. So Renfield has always kind of been like, well, what's our strength? Well, we can only play, power chords, and we can only record in mono. So our approach was always, well, that, we don't just record in mono, we record in blood-curdling mono. That's our thing, So we did a good 4 records like that, where it was, mono recording, only recording in mono. We had keyboards on there, kind of like a pipe organ thing, exactly influenced by a band like the Mummies, not, much less influenced by like Danzig and Misfits than more influenced by like the Mummies and the Ramones. So trying to do that stuff, but that really wasn't where we always wanted to be. It was just kind of like where we were. So for Go was kind of the line where we said like, there's no more keyboards other than, a couple effects here and there on the album, but we were trying to push more towards like, high quality sound and, lead guitar riffs, and just trying to push more towards a pop punk, like Ramones kind of vibe. On the new record that we're working on, I think we have another, like, a good mix of like heavy, like thrashy songs and that, Ramonesy, like Teenage Bottle Rocket, Lillingtons kind of stuff, because that's kind of what I'm really, I really enjoy that stuff. But, and we just kind of want to keep pushing the idea of the Renfields as always being like, we always saw, like, for me, it was always like most of the horror punk bands in the genre are normal dudes dressed like monsters trying to be scary and intimidating. And I always felt like that was really silly. I can't put on monster makeup and try to look scary. I feel like an idiot doing that. So the Renfields was always, well, let's be, our characters are real monsters, but they don't know they're scary and they're really nice. And so our next record, we're trying to push that forward. It's like it sounds really stupid or pretentious or whatever, but it's like a concept record. So we're sort of recording the entire thing in terms of it's like a stage play. So from the beginning of the record to the end of the record will be the beginning of our show to the end of our show. And so you'll have like some spoken word little dudes, and some songs only exist just to push the stage show forward. Because, I mean, for years and years, we flirted with this sort of guar kind of stuff. Like, we used to fight monsters and the robots on stage way back in the day. And, we have a number of members that don't play instruments, and we bring Cthulhu out. And, we're not guar level by any means, but we try to have, like a punk rock party on stage. So.
No, that's not stupid. That's actually brilliant, man. I think that's really, really cool, actually.
Thanks. The growth element, I think, is more in terms of like pushing the idea of what the Renfields are and ahead more than, the music kind of stays in that like punk metal realm a little bit, but just trying to, and as we go forward and people don't fully get like the idea of what we're trying to comment on within the horror scene, we just keep pushing it to more extremes. So previous Renfields records, we still wore the costumes, but on this next record, we switched over and everybody's just wearing high school varsity jackets and high school clothing, because the horror punk scene, if you get into it far enough, you realize it's just like high school. So we figure, well, we might as well dress the part. So, it's just that. I think the growth is not so much musically, but more kind of, idea-wise.
Do you do anything differently during the writing and recording process, to help your mind stay open and fresh to new stuff, to let it flow, to not let the music get stale? Because I know you're writing a lot of stuff for different bands, but how do you keep yourself open and fresh to that?
Usually, it works for me if I'm writing stuff. I have to put myself in a box. Like, I don't really flow very far along the lines of, like, I've heard a lot of people say, they don't want to put any limits on their music and all of that stuff, but that's actually how I work the best. I have to say, this is my concept, this is my idea, this is sort of like, if I'm writing something for one band, I might say, I'm not going to do anything that the Ramones wouldn't do. And back in the day, I kind of did that with the Renfields. Now I sort of push the idea, like if I'm trying to write something and I just can't come up with anything, I sort of have to force myself into a corner. Like for the new record, we have a song called I Was a Teenage Cthulhu Cultist. And I had the idea, I had the name, but I just couldn't find any lyrics for it. I couldn't come up with any lyrics, and I had written like a guitar riff, and I was like, I don't know if this song's going to happen, but I like the title. So I took our band money and I called this artist that I really like, and I was like, hey, can you make a Renfields t-shirt design with this I Was a Teenage Cthulhu Cultist? That's your idea. Give us that design with our logo on it. And then at the same time, I called the t-shirt guy and I was like, hey, I got a design coming through. I need, 100 t-shirts. And so then it was like, okay, well, I just spent, $1,200 of band money for this artist and this shirt. So I have to write the song. And, that kind of thing is really helps me with like lyric writing, especially, where I just force myself, like, no, you gotta write the lyrics. Or like it helps me to message a band member and be like, hey, check out this new song. And maybe I only have half of, a verse done. Well, I'll start texting it. And then it's like, I feel that pressure that I told them I have this whole song. So I don't know. I have to like force myself into a corner sometimes to get results when it comes to songwriting. I mean, sometimes you'll have these big creative floods and you're like, oh, I just wrote 5 songs today. But I always try to think of like bands, like I'm a huge Kiss fan, and Kiss, they put out like a record a year, and that not every record was this inspired masterwork. So how do they do it? They have to, when you're working, luckily for me, it doesn't, especially with a band like the Renfields, who records an album every 5 years. My job is not to write songs, but I try the same methods. Like try to force myself to write the song. If I had to write it today, what would the song be? Because, I've learned with recording the album before, and anything that you work too much on, it ends up becoming like sort of organized beyond any possible recognition. It just becomes a mess.
And you're right. Kiss at one point was pumping out albums like every 6 months to a year. I mean, they were absolutely just flooring it out. But hey,
and I'm of the opinion that many of those records were amazing. Not every song is amazing on every Kiss record, but on every Kiss record, I can find some gems. So I mean, you have to respect a band, that can do that and stay alive that long. So for
sure. And there's a lot. There's bands out there today. I mean, not every song on their albums people like. I mean, to each is their own, and you know that.
Yeah. And, for a band like us, I feel like if it takes us 5 years to put out a record, or 4 years or whatever, then I feel like every song should be amazing. At least, at the end of the day, as a band, right, we should be able to sit down and go, there are no fillers on that record. I'll give Kiss some leeway, but like a band like us, it's like, no, we've got to make sure that all the songs are good. But in 5 years, you should be able to do that. So.
And that would, I mean, I would imagine that would put more stress on you guys. I mean, not stress, but more, I don't know the word I'm looking for here. That'd put more importance to doing the songs better. You know what I'm saying? To put more effort into it.
Yeah.
Than compared to like Kiss. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think, being able to, like, we're not depending on, we have to get this record out by any certain time, but I think it's always a good thing when you're feeling like, fuck, all the songs are done, I wish we could record this record now, is much better than being in a position of, oh, I have to record these, I have to, finish these songs and record them. That would seem better, but in many ways, for me anyway, like if I'm pressured to do it, that's when it seems to work for me. So I don't know.
Man, what do you hope the fans that follow you guys, take away from these albums that you guys have out already, or just the Renfields music in general? What do you hope they get from it?
I really want people to have like, I'd like the Renfields for most people to be the band that's, in the horror punk genre, but not of the horror punk genre. There's like, for most of us, for me definitely though, like I hate horror punk. Like I hate a lot of things about horror punk. I really wasn't aware of the big like horror punk scene, quote unquote, that is a thing. As I was doing those first Renfields records, it wasn't until Renfields played a festival in New Jersey called Ghouls Night Out that I was like, holy fuck, there are so many horror punk bands. And some of them are very cool, and, you know, some of them, you know, are not my taste. But the thing that I really took away from it was the thing that I've known for a long time, which is whenever you have a scene, quote unquote, it kind of becomes a big circle jerk of people just, you know, telling every band in the scene that they're an amazing band because they're part of the scene, and, you know, a lot of sort of mutual admiration kind of society stuff. And I really don't like that. Like, I think anytime you have a scene, it really breeds a lot of bands that sound the same and don't have any sort of unique feel to them. So, you know, for the Renfields, like, if we're, you know, the happy horror punk band, or the horror punk band that gives you something other than, well, they sound exactly like the Misfits, you know, maybe we sound exactly like the Ramones or something. I want to be that band. I'm happy to be in it because there are a lot of very cool, you know, horror punk fans and horror punk supporters, but I don't want to be of it, because to me, you know, anytime you start saying I'm part of this scene or I'm part of that scene, you sort of jump into that, you know, clique of people that think the same and all the bands sound the same, and you start worrying about what other people think about your band, or do we fit in? And, you know, and that's also a way to trap your band into being, you know, yeah, you could be the king of the horror punk scene. You know, if the Renfields were, you know, the kings of the horror punk scene, that's cool and all, but the horror punk scene is tiny. You know, I mean, it's a tiny little scene where everybody knows everyone else. And if you got, you know, you couldn't go to state after state and have a horror punk festival like you could a punk rock festival or a metal festival. And I know that because I've seen the horror punk festivals attempted, you know, and some have done well and some have failed. And we're talking like festivals where all the big names come out, you know, like all of the guys in the horror punk scene, like, you know, Goolsby and fucking Order of the Fly and all these bands that are, you know, legit, you know, horror punk longtime bands to an all horror punk fest, and people come out, but it's not something that could sustain itself. So, you know, you don't want to shoot for I'm the king of the horror punk scene. You have to push out further, you know. Yeah. So I want to be that. I'd like to be that band that is just part of the punk scene, and that's what I always thought we were. Like, I was like, oh, we're a punk band that sings about horror movies, but then I realized, like, fuck, no, we're a horror punk band because there's a genre that is this, you know. So yeah, I would like to be like just something a little bit different.
The band to me that I actually heard that blew me away for punk music was Blitzkid a very long time ago. I mean, that band just absolutely blew me away. I was like, holy shit, this is good.
Well, and when Blitzkid was doing it, they were early, man. They were not, you know, it wasn't a form and a fashion then. And I think, you know, at that time, hearing, you know, a band from West Virginia that played horror punk probably wasn't something that people were used to, you know. And so at the early days, you know, and I think it all happened as a response to, as much as people love the Danzig era Misfits and preach that shit, I hear more bands that sound like Graves era Misfits than anything. And I think that, you know, Return of the Misfits spawned a lot of that stuff. So there was definitely a time where you hear something like Blitzkid, or you hear something like, you know, one of those early bands, like even like, you know, something like the Vladimirs or something, and you're like, oh shit, this doesn't sound like anything else. And that's cool, that first generation stuff. And I didn't, that was not like on my radar, like Blitzkid and that early stuff. Like, I was just listening to Ramones and listening to Misfits stuff, you know, but that first generation stuff was much more authentic than, you know, something like, you know, like the bands that we have now, which are like a bastardized version of a Blitzkid clone of a clone of a band that was a Blitzkid clone. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the further along you go generationally, the music becomes so nauseatingly the same. Like, and you can sit there and listen to a band, and we, you know, horror punk bands, we all have that song that is basically, you know, fucking Saturday Night, you know. And that's it always cracks me up because I meet these bands and they just shit talk the Michael Graves era Misfits, and then they break into their, you know, their stereotypical, we all have one, 50s love song version of a horror song about digging up your girlfriend or whatever, and it's fucking Saturday Night, and it sounds like Saturday Night. And, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of that stuff that's just so recycled and derivative of something that maybe was good at one time. Like there was a band that, to me, the two best horror punk bands around right now are Children of October, because they're a band that's in the scene but not of it. It's like thrash, heavy thrash horror stuff. And then a band that's no longer around called 52 Ways, and they were your horror punk Blink-182, and that band never got the respect they deserved because they were much too different, and they didn't fit into that, just completely ripping off the Blitzkids of the world, or ripping off the Graves or whatever. And so they weren't accepted into the scene, and it died, and they released one of the best horror punk records ever.
Yeah, they were from Atlanta, weren't they? Georgia? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Wow.
Yeah, they were from Georgia, and it blows my mind the fact that record is not considered one of the top 3 like horror punk records ever. But again, like people who are in, when you start putting yourself into a scene, you don't, you almost, anything that doesn't sound like your scene, you're like, well, fuck that. That's not horror punk. I know what horror punk is, but those dudes, they were kind of innovating something very unique on their own. And, it's a shame that it didn't catch on, like I think if they had got the fuck out of the horror punk scene and just kind of went and started trying to set their roots somewhere else, like just play with other punk rock bands, maybe it would have worked out differently for them. I don't know, but that's kind of the aim of the Renfields too. Like I like to play, I'd rather play a show with the Queers than Doyle when he comes to town, or, something like that, because as much as you may think, oh, well, yeah, we're playing in front of a bunch of people that like this thing, it's not always good for you. Sometimes it's better to be this unique thing in the middle of the punk rock scene rather than some band that blends in with everybody else wearing fucking bone gloves and stuff.
I think Doyle's stuff now is more, he's more of a metal guy than, say, horror punk now. And he's even told me on the show before that he wanted to do heavier stuff with the Misfits. But they just wouldn't, it's like you said, it just wasn't their style. But right. I think if they would have done it, man, God, that would have been huge for them too, both ways, horror punk, plus you got the heavier side of it too, which I think the stuff he's got out now is really good, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, and people, most of the people that I talk to that are big Misfits fans, like they're all, I would say 80% of the time people are preaching that Earth AD anyway, so I think people would have loved heavier stuff. Anything really is better than that, what Jerry Only is doing right now. For me, that stuff is like, it's just a record full of, there's a few good ones on there, but man, there's some absolute shit. I actually, I bought the Misfits Devil's Reign at my local record store. This is, I don't know what this says about me. I bought the record and I opened it up, and I saw the picture of the band on the inside, and I took it back in and I begged with them to let me return it. I didn't even need to fucking listen to it. I was like, please, I can't take this home. This is terrible. I can tell it's going to be terrible. Of course, I couldn't return it because I'd opened it, and I got home, I listened to it. And yes, indeed, 90% of I feel like there's about 80 songs on that record, and many of them are terrible, but it did work out good for us because it was right before Go came out, and we specifically went in to the photographer that took all the photos for Go, and we were like, we want to recreate this terrible promo photo. So if you open, I don't even know if we actually used it on the record, but there's a picture of us emulating the pose, this terrible Jerry Only, and Dez pose from the Misfits record, just, because it was just so terrible. But, I think if the Misfits had, kept Graves and kept, and released some of that Doyle heavy stuff that they're doing, people would have been saying, oh, it's the second coming of Earth AD and everything,
I like Doyle stuff he's got out. I think it's really damn good. Me personally,
I gravitate the most when it comes to Misfits stuff. I probably gravitate a lot more towards Famous Monsters, the Graves record. I like that record a lot.
Yeah, that is a good album. Really good album.
I just like the presentation on it as a whole, and I thought it was like an exciting time to be a Misfits fan. And to me, I don't know, how you feel about it, but to me, it's not a very exciting time if you're a Misfits fan, because it's a certain era of the Misfits where we're now playing off nostalgia. You know, the band's not saying like, hey, we're going to go record a new record. They're saying, hey, remember when? You know, remember when we were the Misfits? You know, and it's like a sad version of itself. And you know, horror punks we're all falling for it. Like, hey, oh man, yeah, it's Danzig and Doyle. You know, these fucking people hate each other. You know, like they hate each other and they're doing it for the money. You know, now the Ramones, my favorite band ever, the Ramones also hated each other, at least two of them, but they kept making new records. You know what I mean? Like the Ramones didn't talk for a long time, for like years. Joey and Johnny didn't talk, but they kept making new records. So that's more respectable for me than like we can stand each other a couple times a year for this big cash grab. You know, yeah. I mean, that's how it feels anyway. I'm cynical with horror punk in some ways when it comes to that stuff because, you know, I mean, my whole question is always like, did Glenn Danzig get baptized? Because that's what Jerry Only was preaching for a long time. Like, I won't do the reunion until Glenn Danzig gets baptized. So either Jerry Only's values have changed, or Glenn Danzig got baptized, or money came into the picture and it doesn't fucking matter, which we all know the answer there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that said, also, though, while we're on the Misfits topic, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Hideous, but
yeah,
I watched the Mike Hideous documentary, and that's a cool documentary. As a complete side note, there's a documentary about him called, I don't remember, but there's a documentary about his time in the Misfits, and it's pretty interesting and cool. So.
He wasn't in, that's the thing that drives me up the wall. He wasn't in the Misfits very long, and I thought he was a great vocalist for them. He was heavier for sure.
Yeah, he had a really cool image, and you know, I don't know, I liked it. And I mean, all we've got to go on is the live stuff, and his voice was just kind of different and cool. I'm interested in that time of the band though, because it's like you can see a little bit of Jerry Only sort of scheming going on there, and then as you go further, and you know, there's that point when Zoli, I think that's how you say it, Zoli from Ignite, the singer from Ignite, was in there, and then you heard rumors of Jerry trying to kick Michael Graves out to bring him in, and it's like, it seems to me like it's become this big calculated, like, well, what can we do? You know, how can we get the most money out of this thing? You know, and that's not what you want to see, you know, a band that you respect end up like, you know, how can we, it becomes like a focus group, you know, it's the same thing as a DC Comics movie nowadays where you're like, well, what they cut half the movie out and reshot it because some focus group said they didn't like it, and now it's like, well, we put the Pumpkins on stage, and you know, bring Doyle back and Jerry back, and you know, we say it's the original Misfits, but we can't include Doyle, but we'll put his name at the bottom. It's just so calculated, you know. It's just like, what is the Misfits? Is the Misfits this reunion, or is it Jerry Only by himself? Because now there are two bands existing at the same time in certain ways, you know.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's crazy. It's just weird to me.
I agree. Totally agree. So the new album you guys are working on right now, how much is written on it? And when can you possibly give us a time frame? Maybe? Oh, man. So I would say it's 100% written, and it's called the Renfields versus the Handbook for the Recently Horror Punk. So we have the title and we have all the songs written, but the songs have not necessarily been like practiced and rehearsed. So they tend to change a lot. You know, once it goes from just written down on the page to getting in the room and playing with the actual band, it's way different because, like, you know, once drums come in my brain, drums are one thing, and then you get in the room and start playing, drums completely change for the better, and harmonies come in and everything. So songs that we're playing live right now, though, we're playing like six of probably like 12 or 13 songs live already from that record. So we can play half of the songs on the record, and the other half we've never practiced. So I don't know. I would really hope that, you know, it's like January, so I would hope that we could put it out in Halloween, which would make sense. Ooh, nice.
But, you know, we'll see. Our plan last year was like, we're going to have our new stage show and all of our new stuff going on by Halloween this year, and we didn't make that goal. So we'll see. I don't know. The Renfields is it's a weird thing that takes time as opposed to other stuff that I'm involved with, which seems to just go like super quick. But the Renfields is like this big, ugly, you know, fat hippo of a band that just creeps and crawls its way along. And, you know, we play less shows, we record less records, but I'm still just as excited about it as anything else I'm doing, but it just takes a long time, you know. Same thing with, you know, playing shows. We have so many members that getting everyone to a show is hard. You know, even in a band, we don't have enough spaces for people. So
I want to talk about this a little bit because we talked about this before we started recording this interview, and this, folks, kind of pissed me off pretty good, because you have bands, regardless of what they look like, you get on a bill. Well, I guess a little outdoor booking that you guys were going to do, and they didn't want to have you because of the way you look. That's stupid. All because of a flyer, and it began with a taco with a pentagram. So
yes, so we were asked to play, which in one way it says a lot about the coolness of this town. There's a mayor of a town in southern West Virginia, and he asked us to play their, I think it was, I want to say 4th of July. I honestly can't remember. The 4th of July, I think, celebration. And he was really excited, and we were like, fuck yeah, well, you know, all right, you know, the mayor wants us to play the 4th of July, it's a big fair and all this stuff. And so they advertised that the Renfields were going to be there. And then somebody from a church in Pineville, West Virginia, was combing the internet with nothing else to do. And they found a flyer that we had made for one of our shows that had a taco with pentagram on it. And so apparently, you know, it was like, I think they had their, you know, like the moment at the end of Saw when all the scenes kind of flash back and everything comes together and you realize, you know, you found out who's behind this whole thing. They had that moment and they went, holy shit, this band is a satanic, you know, they're a vehicle of the devil's music. And so they started a campaign in that community to keep the Renfields out. And it was the weirdest thing, man. Like, we were, you know, we're a band that we have a fucking man in a werewolf costume in gym shorts running around. Like, this is the level of absurdity that we're talking. You know, how serious can this be? But they were, you know, and they were sharing pictures of my face with my makeup and saying, like, look, you know, this proves it. Look, this is the face of a devil worshiper and all of this stuff. And it became a big debate in this small town of, you know, are we going to let the Renfields play? You know, the people from the church were saying they weren't coming. And then there were these really, like, cool people who were, like, you know, trying to defend us. And they were like, you know, the Renfields, you know, my kids love the Renfields, and this is the most positive, nice band ever, and all of this stuff. And it was just this big sort of debate. And unfortunately, though, the anticlimactic side of it is the mayor, who's totally a badass, cool guy, was like, well, fuck you guys. The Renfields are going to play, and don't come if you want to spread this kind of stuff, you know.
Oh, nice.
And so we went and we played the Pineville 4th of July. I think it was 4th of July. And nobody showed up to protest. Not one. As a matter of fact, everybody we met was lovely. Everybody was wonderful. Even, like, you know, the grandmothers of the time were in the audience watching and jamming out with the werewolf. And it was just, you know, it was just like, it's just a very good example of the internet community today, which is we're going to protest as long as we don't have to get off our asses and actually go do something, you know. And it's like, this is the kind of shit that I like and I live for in some ways. Like, oh man, I really like kind of like pushing people's buttons. But for that one, it bummed me out in many ways because, and I never thought that I would be someone who would be bummed out by that. But like, I just sitting around going like, these people have never seen our band. Like, they don't know what we sound like. They've never met us. And they're being this judgmental about, you know, what we stand for. It's such a weird thing, you know. But of course, you know, there are, you know, legitimate issues like that occur in society every single day. But it was just strange. Like, you know, this is the level of idiocy that people have. So
Agreed.
I will say though, like, for our next record, we're definitely making a very big push towards satanic lyrics. Just I guess just for fun on this one. So, you know, we're summoning Cthulhu on the next record. We're also going to summon Cthulhu Lucifer. and just have some. We have a song about the devil and falling in love with the devil and stuff. Just not because we're like edgy badass Satanists or anything, but just because it's kind of like, well, I guess we kind of have to go there now for fun. If you do it with a smile, it changes everything. So
I wouldn't. I don't want to call them ignorant people. I just want to say that they're misinformed and not educated folks on the music that you guys play. And that's just like I said. I hate folks that judge a book by its cover without trying to read it.
Yeah. And it's so funny because, I mean, we're a band that, like, I would say, I think all but maybe one person in our band doesn't touch drugs, alcohol, we don't even smoke. Some of our members are volunteers, and we're like the people that you want your kids to hang out with.
Yeah.
At least that's aside from our Renfields characters, but I mean, like, it's just so funny that it's like they have no idea who they're coming against. Because like we have a member that literally volunteers for everything. Like, he helps with the fucking soup kitchen, and he does it. Certainly not me. I'm not that motivated, but I mean, we have some really good dudes and ladies in our band, and it's like, it's just funny that people will see that taco with a pentagram and but I mean, I experienced that as a child too. I was a big Kiss fan, and I grew up in a household with parents that were very level-headed, but also were Christians, and they never restricted my music or what I watched. But I had many pastors and youth leaders and preachers come up to me and try to hit me with this revelation that Kiss stood for the knights in Satan's service, or the kings of Satan's service, or they played for the kids in Satan's service. And even at that age, I was like, you guys need to get it together and figure out what it stands for, because you're all telling me something different. You obviously don't know what you're talking about, And so, I mean, it's just weird. Like, I have like a really good nostalgia for the satanic panic of the 80s. If you're old enough, we remember that. Like, when, oh my God, Judas Priest, their lyrics, if you play them backwards, they're satanic. Or, the Gene Simmons is the devil, or, all of this stuff. Like, I remember that fondly because I was still able to listen to that music, and I just saw people freaking out, that were uninformed and didn't understand it. I kind of like that, So,
it's like, do you want...
being the target of it was different,
It's like, do you want your kids to hang out with the Renfields or Jack the Ripper? Which...
Right.
Which one?
Yeah. Yeah, or the Renfields or Grand Inquisitor Torquemada. Which one do you think is going to be nice to your kids?
That's true.
And that's sad. I've seen really wonderful people who were believers in God, and people who who showed nothing but the good side of that stuff. And so that's another reason why it bummed me out, because as much as that's not me. I've seen a good version of that, and I hated, that I was encountering the negative version. I like to think that maybe there's a better version of Christianity in the world than what we see on social media, and I think there is, just like anything else. It's the loud ones are the assholes. The ones that aren't talking about it are the ones that are nice. So I don't want to let that make me bitter against any certain group of people.
My favorite songs off of Go, I've got quite a few actually. Prom Night, Halloween Night, Machete A Go-Go, Forbidden Planet, Last Man on Earth. Great songs, I think, off that album.
Thank you very much.
So, I mean...
those are some of our, especially like Machete and Prom Night, those go way, way back to our old, mono recordings where there were just two members, and it was like, for a while it was just me and a drum machine, and then it was, me and a drummer and stuff. And so those were the songs that we just felt like if we were going to update the Renfields and go to a new record, we should put some of those old ones on there, especially the Prom Night and Machete A Go-Go, because those are the songs that people tend to want to hear or remember from us, from those, those mono DIY. I mean, we're still DIY, but, more super DIY days, like when every record was, all the liner notes were printed on an Epson Stylus Color 2 printer one by one.
Yeah.
So,
I remember that. That's back in the day. That was really back in the day.
and we were always, my whole thing was like, I knew our records were kind of shitty, but I was like, I want to go like above and beyond with the packaging. So like we would put like 3D glasses for the cover, or we had we stole the old William Castle idea and we put a certificate of death insurance in case you died of fright while listening to the record and stuff. And like just trying to be like, yeah, our album's shitty, but look, it comes with something. It comes with something cool. So there was a point where we released a box set, and each one had a latex cover on the outside of the box set, but they were hand painted. And so anytime we sold one, we had to paint one, and it was the worst idea ever. I think we advertised 100, but got lazy after about 30 and just quit making the box set.
Oh, geez. Man, how can folks stay in touch with you guys, find out when this album's coming out, buy some merchandise, tour dates, whenever you guys take this on the road again? How can they do that, man?
We're kind of like Sasquatch. It's hard to catch us, but we do have a Facebook page. We're trying to get that up to snuff. We did have a web store a while ago. It was run by our bass player, who's no longer in the band. I think he closed it down. I still have to open up a new web store. So right now there's nothing online unless I've seen like Renfield stuff pop up on eBay and stuff, but and you could message the Facebook page, but it might be a little rough there. I know we're on iTunes. Go is certainly on iTunes. And then even though I think that money goes to our old bass player, I have no idea where it goes. I don't really carry it, but it's on iTunes. We're on Spotify, so you can look for Renfields Go. But there's another band called the Renfields, and they were like a weird horror garage band. So that's not us. The only one from us is Renfields Go. Then we have about 4 records. Like our entire discography is available through, it's called West Virginia Rock Scene Bandcamp, and you can get our first 4 records, which are all like the super mono, recorded in a basement kind of stuff, and that's all available on there. Merch wise, I guess you just have to come to a show, and we do still play shows regularly. And I think once we get the new record recorded, we're going to try to like roll everything out, as far as like a new web store and stuff, but. Yeah, you just kind of got to track us down, I guess. Come to one of the 1 or 2 shows that we play each month.
Before I let you go, would you care to do a promo for the show?
Yeah. All right. Hey, this is Vincent Renfield from the world's greatest horror punk band, the Renfields. This is BODS Mayhem Hour. Thanks.
Everybody stick around. We got some great, great music coming up, and you only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour and Uber City Radio. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much.